rapidly rising energy demand is clearly overwhelming the existing power generating plants in South Africa. According to government, the country needs to install between 3,000 to 4,000 megawatts of renewable energy per annum over the next 30 years. As part of a long-term shift towards renewable-based power systems, let's speak more on this with Mohamed Madhi of Sanan Energy. Thank you very much, sir, for availing yourself this afternoon. So just how much power do we need for the next 30 years?
We need a heck of a lot of power for the next 50 years. But, the plan to add 3 or 4 or 5,000 megawatts per annum of renewable energy is not exactly the most optimum plan. So we need about that amount of power at the very least. In fact, we would say you need more power than that right now. And power is certainly retarding economic activity in this country. I think that's fairly clear. Most people are aware of that. How much we need over the next 30 years is a function of, many factors, not just one, economic growth, etc. But certainly what is clear is that the existing 40 plus gigawatts of capacity that we have is not going to be sufficient. So the question is, how do you replenish it? At what rate and with what form of energy? And, replenishing it with a centralized form of energy, in our opinion, is a grave error.
On the what form of energy question, in terms of trying to find the solution, this transition away from coal for us as a country has divided opinion. I'd like to maybe get your position on that and how that would help South Africa.
Okay, so I think we need to understand that global trends and the global technology situation is not going to be halted, to wait for South Africa to get its house in order. We are living in a wider context of what's happening in the energy landscape globally. And we need to understand that if we don't synchronize with that, we're likely to fall behind. So let me give you a concrete example. We're hoping to replenish 3, 4, 5,000 megawatts per annum, and hoping that the coal-fired plants will continue until they get replenished at this rate in a linear fashion. Renewable energy is not growing in a linear way. It's growing in an exponential way. The uptake of renewable energy is certainly exponential. The cost-benefit ratio of renewable energy is much higher, much better than we would expect. So in 3, 4, 5 years' time, it's going to make absolutely no sense to have coal-fired power. It makes no sense right now, but the big problem is baseload power. And we know that battery storage is not yet there, it's not yet affordable. Certainly the technology exists. We can do battery storage, but it's not affordable for everyone. The critical point where storage becomes affordable is at a maximum of 48 months away. Many experts will argue and say it's closer, that we'll have affordable storage sooner. But let's take the conservative view. Let's say 48 months away. So in 48 months' time, you'll have renewable energy, which is already cheaper, and you'll have different forms of energy storage, not just lithium-ion batteries or not just batteries. And these combined are going to provide power cheaper than any form of coal-fired power. So you're not going to have the room or the luxury to slowly step down your coal-fired power plants. So this is the context we need to understand from a global technology perspective and from an economic perspective. Once we understand that, we then need to synchronize our strategy to what is happening there. We simply cannot put our heads in the sand and say, this is South Africa's needs and this is how we're going to do it. Technology is not going to wait, cost-benefit analysis is not going to wait, and the private sector is not going to wait. Private sector is already not waiting. So they are currently, we are putting in a lot of power plants for private sector clients who already see the benefit. So this is where we have a problem. Coming back to the coal industry, the industry itself is in dire straits. So what we need to remember is that Eskom does not, is not the stabilizing force or the foundation of the industry. What is behind the coal industry are the engineering companies and the companies that provide the equipment, the turbines, the parts, and every other piece of machinery that you need to run a coal-fired power plant. Those large companies on a global scale are scaling down their coal departments, their coal-fired power departments. They're scaling down the people in those departments. And very soon, in a matter of a few years, you'll have almost no competence left in coal-fired power plants. Certainly not enough to keep the kind of fleet that we have in this country going for another 50 years. So that, again, is a global trend that we need to understand. Coal as an industry, coal-fired power as an industry is dying a very quick death. Allied to that is the fact that, many financial institutions would now not fund coal-fired power plants. So these factors have to be taken into account. And what's clearly missing is a set of priorities for the energy industry in South Africa. We get a statement, and the most recent statements by the Minister of Transport about jobs, about local manufacturing, about ensuring that workers are reskilled and so on. Those are random statements without any guidance from an overarching priority. So we really need to say, what is our number one priority? Is it energy? Is it jobs? Is it the manufacturing industry? And then based on the number one priority, work out exactly a rational schedule of events of what we need to do to get to a stable power situation in this country.
Mr. Madhi, then let's expand on that point that you make, right? So you've spoken about technology not affording to wait. South Africa is likely to fall behind. We've touched on the what needs to be done. What about who needs to do this, right? Maybe the question being then the current crop of leadership that we have in the country, and not just talking about Eskom as if it's just the only entity that is responsible for this. It's a bigger network, right? Does it appear to you that there is leadership that will lead us to this transition or lead us through the transition?
We have to be very careful about that question. So let's just address the Eskom issue one, because it seems to be a current topic and so on. I think the Eskom leadership are simply pawns in terms of the wider issues that we face. Focusing on whether or not we need to have Eskom leadership removed is not really focusing on the real problem. The real problem is the mindset and the philosophy of the primary shareholder of Eskom, and that is government. So government, first and foremost, needs to get its mind in gear. It needs to get its policy in gear. And then the pawns that sit in the various state-owned entities, not just Eskom, but, related industries, related entities, public enterprises, Department of Finance, Treasury, all of these, need to then be synchronized with that philosophy and that policy. That philosophy and that policy is missing. So every time, we change the deck chairs at Eskom, and I'm not making a statement on whether or not those people are competent. That's a different issue. I'm saying that we're focusing on the wrong thing. Let's focus on government's philosophy. Let's focus on government's mindset for changing the problem. So that's the leadership issue. When we look at the ministers involved, unfortunately, save for a few ministers who are very diligent and very hardworking, most of them are not competent. And even the hardworking ones, unfortunately, are not competent in their particular industries that they are mandated to have oversight of. This is a unique phenomenon in a country that's as developed as we are. If you look at other developed countries, if you look at countries at the same stage of development as us or higher, you'll find that ministers typically have a very solid grasp and a very solid understanding, a very solid track record and a background in the industries over which they have oversight, so that they do not become puppets to their advisors. They do not just, repeat what the advisors say. They do not sort of repeat what the leadership of state-owned enterprises say, but they have their own opinion. They can provide their own driving policy for that industry. That is sorely lacking in this country, whether it's the Department of Minerals and Energy, whether it's any of the other departments. They don't have a fundamental understanding. So the ministers involved don't have a fundamental understanding. They have a very glib understanding of those industries. We need to change that. And personally, I think we need to have a very educated, in that particular area, set of leaders to look after this energy transition. And then the same applies, of course, to the state-owned entities and related institutions.
Thank you very much for your perspective. Mohamed Madhi is with Sinan Energy, that's SINAN. Thank you very much for availing yourself.